Despite what many people refer to as being elevator music, I grew up with an obsession of jazz. Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington, Nat King Cole, or, the focus of this video, the First Lady of Song, Ella Fitzgerald. She is so well renowned that pretty much everyone knows her work, or at least her name. But what a lot of people don't know is what she went through as a black artist in her time. The civil rights movement was really important to Fitzgerald as a performer. She signed on Norman Granz as her sole manager, a strong civil rights activist who did everything he could to protect his clients. Wherever Ella performed, she was confined to segregated bathrooms and seating arrangements, something Granz did his best to fix before she would arrive to perform. Ella grew up in the suburbs of New York. She started singing as a little kid in the church she and her mother would go to every week. When she was 15, her mom died, and Ella was sent to Black Harlem, a city rich with jazz music. She actually got into her singing career there, and it happened by accident. She entered a beginner's talent show at the Apollo Theater, planning on doing a dance routine, but when she got on stage, she got so nervous that she ended up just singing instead. Not surprisingly, she won. Ella Fitzgerald made a name for herself because she did with jazz what no one else had done before, especially no other woman. Her unique voice allowed her to go places that no other African Americans would have been allowed to, opening doors for others who followed her. One of my favorite examples of this is Ella Fitzgerald performing at Macombo, one of the most popular nightclubs in Los Angeles at the time. Macombo originally didn't allow black people to perform, but with a little help from a defiant phone call from Marilyn Monroe, Macombo allowed Fitzgerald to perform. And, as soon as she did, her career really took flight. She was no longer confined to tiny jazz clubs. People knew her name. Don't forget though, it wasn't easy to be black, even if you were famous. We often overlook the way famous black people were treated in this era because we assume that they were admired far too much to be discriminated against. In all reality, their widespread admiration just made the discrimination they faced all the more twisted. Fitzgerald lived in some of the worst times of the Jim Crow laws. Once, while Ella was touring in Dallas, a police squad barged into her dressing room where she and some band members were shooting dice. The police continued to arrest all band members at their own venue. In recalling the event, Ella said, "They took us down, and then, when we got there, they had the nerve to ask for an autograph." I like to think about what effect Ella's songs themselves had on making people reconsider their own racism. Ella was the first real female jazz artist with a prestigious reputation. Her voice was so beautiful that everyone wanted to hear it, even if they didn't like the way she looked. She was not a small, delicate woman, pretty in the traditional sense that almost all famous women in her time were. She was a black woman with a lot of talent, enough to make a lot of people look deeper. She pushed herself throughout her entire career, to the point where it ended up being pretty damaging to her health. She had to put in more work than a more privileged person with her talent would have. She would literally travel hundreds of miles in one day to do multiple shows in cities far apart from each other. In the time of Ella's fame, there were a lot of interesting parts of the civil rights movement that potentially did more harm than good. The phrase, "I am a man," was often pasted onto posters of black men, a small microaggression to the women in the movement. But in the midst of this progression and digression, jazz was being created, and it formed a culture that didn't just influence the civil rights movement, it sort of became the civil rights movement. Stanley Crouch wrote that jazz predicted the civil rights movement more than any other art in America. Jazz musicians took up the cause in their lyrics and music, and by taking part in a culture that judged people due to their talent rather than their skin. They didn't have to earn the respect of white America, they simply had to earn the respect of other jazz artists. Ella Fitzgerald was the first African American woman to win multiple Grammy Awards. In her lifetime, she won 14. She was one of the first to perform at the Super Bowl, was the first black woman to headline at the Copacabana nightclub, and concluded her career at Carnegie Hall. Ella Fitzgerald was one of the most important parts in making jazz a civil rights movement, and we still look upon the work she did today.